It's episode 4 of the Speed Secrets podcast, and today's guest is Joey Todd. Get ready to talk high performance and race driving and take away some tips and advice that you can use to be an even better driver.
Welcome to the Speed Secrets podcast. Join Ross Bentley and guests, drivers, instructors, and coaches, engineers, officials, and others for conversations about high performance and race driving. Listen for tips and advice, thought-provoking ideas, and inspiration to take your own driving to the next level. Green, green, green!
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today's guest is Joey Todd, who is best known for at least two things, probably more, but the two things that I know, he owns and operates the World Racing League Series and Momentum Performance Driving Academy. Thanks for joining us, Joey. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ross.
Yeah, this could be fun. We've gotten to know each other a little bit over the past year or so as I've competed in some WRL races. And, I've told you, but I'm going to tell listeners right now that I've absolutely loved my experience racing in WRL. I think you've done an amazing job of the balance between fun and professionalism, the quality of the drivers and the quality of the cars. I think it's a right balance. I think that's what I really like about what you've created with WRL. And, drivers actually know what they're doing on the track. They're not banging into each other. And, the cars are, relatively low budget. And yet, there's not a bunch of junk cars out there. So it's been seriously fun. I know you also do a bunch of instructing. You spend a lot of time instructing with, in the HPDE world, the high performance driver education world. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about both of those things today. WRL racing, low budget racing, and the performance driving world. So, you started World Racing League, WRL. What was your thinking behind that? Why did you do that?
Well, at the time, really the only two ways to go endurance racing, if you wanted to do something more than a 2 or 3 hour enduro with one of the clubs, was to either go to like the 25 hours at Thunder Hill,
yep,
or to do Chump Car or Lemons. And what we saw was a gap in the market between, the what they call budget endurance, which is Chump and Lemons or crack cans, or, there's several different terms. So between that and World Endurance Challenge at the pro level, there just really wasn't anything there. So kind of what we envisioned was maybe a club racing level endurance series for people who had cars that were already built for SCCA or NASA or PCA, who they wouldn't necessarily identify with maybe the Lemons, the way Lemons runs races, which is kind of geared more around. I think even they say, it's kind of like a party where a race breaks out, which is a good description. It's a lot of fun. It's built around people just going out and having fun in cars, having a good time. Beginners, people who've never raced before, great way to get into the sport. Same with Chump Car when it started. It was just a super low barrier way to get in. And we wanted to kind of step up from that. And put something together where the drivers had more experience and the cars were a little bit better prepped, and just kind of fit in that niche where it's a little bit more serious, but it's not so serious that it becomes, people don't get so engrossed in it that it just becomes checkbook racing and I have to win at all costs type thing.
It's talked about as low budget endurance racing. Is there such a thing?
Well, I guess it depends on what your budget is, but if you're looking at it compared to pro racing, sure, it's low budget. But it's the way we've set it up is it doesn't really matter how much you spend. It's your car is classed by its performance potential. Mm-hmm. So when you land in a GP2 or GP1 class, it's because that's where your car probably best fits in terms of relative performance to the other cars in that class. It's all power to weight based. So then really the differentiator becomes how well you prep the car, how well you prep the driver, and then what your race strategy is. So we're trying to keep the money out of it. But of course we have, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 race cars that show up. But we also have guys with, cars that they built for the budget series on a, $3,500 budget. So it really does encompass whatever level you want to spend. The more you spend, the faster class you're likely to end up in, though.
So what are teams? Do you have a ballpark? I mean, what are teams typically spending per weekend, per event? Do you have any idea on that?
It's tough to say, and there's so many variables that go into it. But I would think that a team, if you take the car out of the equation, that's a given. That's your underlying cost. If you just look at the weekend expenses, you've got about a $1,200 entry fee. You've got a few $100s in tires and fuel. So you're probably $3,000 or $4,000 on a budget for the weekend, split between 3, 4, 5 drivers, however many drivers you want to bring.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been kind of the appeal for the endurance thing is you're able to split those costs across a team of drivers. So it's bringing the cost down, and you compare that with the amount of seat time you get. So these guys are in the car for 4 hours over the weekend, or 5 hours or more in some cases, because we don't really have a minimum driver count. So you can get as much seat time as you want. It really is team specific on how you want to split all that up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess overall, I mean, from when you started this thing, has it kind of lived up to your expectations? Is it where you want it to be?
It is now, and it got a pretty quick start as far as us getting differentiated from the budget endurance series. When we first started, a lot of people looked at us as just a third crap can series, and we worked really hard to try to create that distinction between what they do and what we do. Our rules are a little bit different. The way we handle racing and cars and the way we look at things is a little bit different. But early on in the first year, we had a race in Colorado, and Chris Cervelli brought a couple of spec Boxsters out and raced with us in that race because he had looked at the rules and realized, hey, this is really for just about any car that we can bring as long as it meets the safety requirements and the classing requirements. We could bring anything. So he had a couple of spec Boxsters that they run in PCA, brought them out. They competed very well, but they still could not overcome the experience of a team that had been running Chump Car for a while in their early years. They had a lot to learn. And Chris said, yeah, there's a lot of things here that we need to work on that, we see the strategies and the pit stops and everything. And we weren't really prepared for people taking it that seriously when we first started, but they worked on that, and they're still a very competitive team to this day. But that kind of broke the perception that this was just another form of budget racing when we did that. And since then, we've started to see more and more cars from PCA and BMW and SCCA and NASA show up. Whether they're currently running with those series or in a lot of cases they're cars that used to run in one of the clubs and they've reconfigured it for endurance racing.
Yeah, and I think that's been my experience so far with the WRL races that I've been in. It is there's just a great mix of quality of cars, and like any of these types of any of these races, there's always somebody to race. There's always somebody that's around your speed, which is part of the fun of this thing. And I think, for a lot of people that do track days they've been doing track days for a number of years, but they've never really gone wheel to wheel racing. I think this is just such a great opportunity for them to get into something that's, doesn't cost a fortune, all things being relative. It doesn't cost a fortune. It's easy to get involved in, it doesn't cost a ton of money to get all your safety equipment and everything. I mean, you got to do the right stuff, but it's relatively easy to get involved with, but it takes your driving to a whole other level. I've seen drivers who, they plateau as a track day driver because they've been driving by themselves for years, and they go and do one wheel to wheel race. They go and do one WRL race, and they're now lapping the track 2 seconds a lap faster because they get out there and they're mixing it up and they're seeing what other cars are doing and other drivers are doing. I think it's just such a great experience that way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and you can't beat the adrenaline rush. It's always there. No matter anytime you go on the track. If I go out on the track by myself, there's always a little bit of butterflies, when you first go out, and there should be. But when you get out in a race, when you're sitting on grid, you go out behind the pace car, you're warming the tires and the car up double wide and weaving back and forth, and then forming the pack up before the start. there's a level of excitement there that a lot of people who've been doing this for a long time just eat that up. That's bread and butter for them. So it's a lot of fun, and it's great that the WRL accepts people who are solo qualified in HPDE. In other words, if you've met that requirement in the HPDE world, you're qualified for a license with us. So it's a great stepping off point from working your way up through the HPDE ranks and then getting into wheel to wheel, where you don't actually have to go spend another weekend or another, $2,000 or $3,000 to get a competition license. We feel like that by the time you're to that point where you're solo qualified, you're in an advanced group or you're in an open passing group, you already have the skills, and you may even have more skills than what you might gain from one of the club licensing programs.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were talking about the pace lap and forming up and everything, man, I've been racing for almost 40 years, and my heart started to pound just you talking about it. So yeah, it's exciting stuff. It's great stuff. And so as the new people coming into WRL, I mean, coming from HPD world, kind of what's their biggest challenge in the transition? Is it that wheel to wheel stuff? Is it the passing?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit different for different folks, because we do get a wide variety of HPDE qualifications coming in. You have different groups out there that teach things and do things a little bit differently. But I would think the most common one probably is the close quarters. When you get a group of 5 or 6 or 7 cars and they're all battling for position, they're not just trying to get by a slower car. When you're in a DE, and when I'm out there running, I'll wait until there's an easy, opportune time to get past somebody. I'm not going to push it. But if you're in a race, there's a little bit more urgency to get by somebody. And I think that level of urgency kind of comes naturally for most people. But at the same time, you have to kind of get used to the different mindset in, I can get past him coming out of the next turn versus I need to get past him now.
Yeah. So what's new with WRL? I mean, I see, you've the 2017 schedule is out and more races.
Actually, yeah, I think we're at about the same number of races, but what we've done is we've replaced some of the regional kind of club level tracks with some of the big, what everybody likes to call the bucket list tracks, or the premier venues, the pro level venues. So we added Road America, we've added Daytona, Road Atlanta, VIR, Barber, which is a favorite of a lot of folks. So the expansion geographically is happening. The expansion to the bigger tracks and the more desirable tracks that everybody wants to run is happening, but we're still running some of the more popular regional tracks as well. So yeah, we've got that going on. We have a partner that operates races for us in the Southeast now, which takes a little bit of the pressure off of our core staff. And allows us to kind of adopt more of a supervisory role and a chief steward role versus, we have to do everything operations wise at the race. And that'll be helpful. And that, because they have existing relationships with tracks in their neck of the woods now, they can kind of help open up some of those tracks for us. And then the other component this year, some of the big news is we've added, we've replaced a class. We had a class called GPX, which is a class for cars that we couldn't really class in one of the production car groups because it was too fast or it had too many modifications. There was some reason why. We've replaced that with a class called GTO. Mm-hmm. And Grand Touring Open allows for cars that have more modification than what a lot of the traditional endurance crap can or budget racing cars had, or what some of the more basic club racing cars had. It opens up tube frame cars and higher end suspension mods and things like that. So and then of course higher power. So that's going to be a car like we've had a couple of new BMW 235 IRs race with us. That I think you saw at Circuit of the Americas. That will be the class that they land in, as well as maybe a GP1 car, let's say a Boxster, spec Boxster that someone decided they're going to drop a bigger motor in, the 3.2, I think it is, and do some heavy modification to the car because that's what they want to do. They now have a class to go run it in.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, those the M235s or whatever it was, they were tough to compete against at Coda. Fortunately, it was raining, so I got by one of them. So I had some of the most fun I've had in years. Almost 3 hours of driving in the pouring rain at Coda. That was totally awesome. You've also got Super Miata coming in.
Correct.
How does that work into a weekend? So
yeah, we had a couple of conversations with 949 Racing about their series and that they run in California. They want to expand Super Miata to the other side of the Rockies, basically to the rest of the country. They've got some demand. They get phone calls and emails like we do. But they didn't really, they have their shop and their, what they're doing in California. They don't have time to bring all that stuff out here. So they were looking for a partner, and they like the way that we run events and what our attitude is towards racing and the sport itself. So we're moving forward on an agreement where we'll bring the races east of the Rockies and operate them for Super Miata. So we'll have a Super Miata race weekend. Would basically be a race either before or after the WRL endurance race. So on a Saturday, we might start Super Miata at 8:00. They run back-to-back sprints, and then they're done by 9:00. We have an hour break. Everybody loads it. Everybody brings their cars up on pit road. We get everybody gridded up, and 10:00 we start the WRL Enduro and run until 6 that evening. So it won't impact any of the track time that we're dedicating to the endurance side in WRL. But at the same time, it opens up an avenue for people who want to do sprint racing to come out and do that with us. The beauty of the Super Miatas is they fall into a WRL class. So you could potentially run the same car that morning that you run in the endurance race that afternoon if you wanted to. Or you could have a Super Miata that you bring to the track along with your endurance racer and get that much more seat time in.
Well, that's cool. One of the things I like about what you said is the endurance race now starts at 10 a.m. rather than an 8 a.m. start, because I hate those early mornings.
Yeah, it's a hit or miss thing. Some guys like the earlier start because it gives them more time to fix the car in the evening. But yeah, it has been popular where we have tried that. We've done it at a couple of places for different reasons, but it gives us more time to get things prepared in the morning. It gives the teams more time; they can sleep in. There's some advantages there, and it won't be every event. We won't have at least this year we wouldn't have a Super Miata event until later in the year, and it won't be at all the events. Down the road, it may be. It depends on how popular it becomes, but it really is. It's a cool little series. I really like what they're doing. I like the way that the car prep is really kept under control and things are kept under wraps without having to detail every last little thing that goes on the car. It's kind of a system that works similar to ours in a way as far as classing the cars goes. And I also like the fact that they are just as focused on education as they are on racing. So part of the race weekend is some classroom time where the racers can come in and talk to the chief driving instructor about techniques and situations that happen during the races. Bring your video in. We'll go through the video, or we can just discuss it. And they actually want to create a better driver, a better skilled driver on the racetrack. So that's in my mind, that's a great thing. That's
to me, that's what it's all about. So I love that. So that is really, really cool. So let's switch a little bit to the HPDE track day stuff. And you've been operating those kinds of events for how many years now?
It's been almost 6.
Okay.
So between our momentum school with WRL and the performance driving school at Texas World Speedway, we've been doing about 10 to 12 events a year.
So when you see a new driver come in, they've come off the street, this first time they're at the track, what's your experience? What's the thing that they struggle with the most, their biggest challenge? Because I've asked this question of many, many people that instruct HPDE stuff, and it's interesting to see what your answer is. So the biggest struggle, the biggest challenge for somebody that's showing up at their very, very first track day event.
The advice that I start with when I have a student is relax and don't get in a big hurry this weekend. Let's work through some basics. And I mean, some of the things that are very, very basic to me and you that we don't even necessarily think about is a completely new concept to them. And breaking habits. And the thing that they struggle with the most, and I've seen this in DEs and also in experience programs where, people can buy a ticket to drive a car for a day. And you kind of have to go through a very condensed instruction period with those types of situations. But the one thing I see them struggling the most with on the track is vision, is not looking ahead. They're looking right over the hood of the car, and they're following the inside edge. They're not tracking out. They're not using the whole track. Those are from a technical standpoint. I think those are the two biggest things. But the one thing that I get, I'm not necessarily frustrated with, but I guess I get a little disappointed with is the person who comes in and, they don't want to be a novice. I want to be a novice for like 10 minutes and then I want to go to the blue group for the next group up. And it's like, no, take your time. Just slow down, take your time, take all of this in, because not only are you learning the basics and some great skills and some great techniques and having fun doing it, but you're also around a bunch of really great, folks who they share a passion. And, just slow down over the course of the weekend and take it all in. The in-car instruction, the garage discussions, the social activities, if there are any with that particular DE over the weekend, just soak it all in and really make the culture a part of the weekend and a part of who you are that weekend.
I hear you say about you talk about habits, and that's that's a big part of what I work with when I'm working with drivers is changing people's mental programming. And I think about it and go, how many years did it take for them to develop that habit of looking just beyond the hood, or holding the steering wheel with one hand, being jerky with the brakes, that kind of stuff. How many years did they take to develop that habit? And then they come in and it's like, well, I've been on the track for 15 minutes. Can't I move on to the next thing? I've broken all my bad habits, right?
Had one good session where I almost put everything together.
Yeah.
But it's on the other side of that, it's really great when you see the light bulb go off too.
Some magic.
By the end of some point during the weekend, they've had some sort of an epiphany somewhere about something, and they go, "Oh, I got it." Whether it's the using the whole track thing or not, stabbing the brakes. Whatever it is, you can kind of see, and they relax a little bit and they start having more fun.
So that's a question actually I like asking a lot of people is, I mean, you've been driving on track and racing for years and everything, but do you remember one of those aha moments for yourself where it's kind of like, oh man, everything just clicked, when I do this, wow, that makes everything work for me?
Oh yeah. Early on, I got started in autocross, which is fantastic for learning car control and being smooth. Really,
I agree.
I had a front wheel drive car, and I quickly learned entry speed into a turn is critical. Way more than you think. I mean, I was, up to that point, I had never done anything like that. And it was just like, mash the gas pedal and go. And if I need to slow down, I'll just hit the brakes, and crank the wheel and go. And it didn't take long for me to realize that, plowing through the turn is not the fast way through the turn. And that was kind of like my first learning moment. My first aha was like, I really need to get this entry speed right. I need to get on the brakes in time to slow the car down, but off the brakes, so that I can attack that turn the right way and get through it, fast, instead of just plowing through it with tires howling and, sliding it and knocking a cone off on the outside of the turn with the back end of the car. It was ugly the first time. So, but it comes quickly. Unfortunately, there's not, unless you find a mentor or somebody, to talk to in an event like that, it could take a little bit longer to figure those things out for some folks. I was fortunate that there was a guy, and I don't remember his full name now, but I remember it was Tommy. But he's a multi-time national champion SEC autocross, and he would always do course walks with anybody, novices, anybody, before the event, and he was open to questions and would answer. He would jump in the car and ride with you, whatever. So. Having somebody to talk to and having somebody to actually get in the car with you, I think is really critical. I got my SCCA comp license not too much not too much longer after that, and really under that program that I went through, and they have different programs, but the one I went to was called a Super School Weekend, where they just put me in my car and put me on track with everybody else and said, go race and don't hit anybody. And there was no right seat instruction. I did have an instructor who watched from the side of the track, but you and I know that you can see things, but I can't see, from outside of the car what I'm doing with my feet or where I'm looking, or anything like that. They can kind of see where I am on the track and whether I entered the turn too late or, missed the apex or whatever, but that's kind of it. So getting somebody in the car, and we're kind of getting off track here, but having somebody in the car with you, I think is fundamental to becoming a good driver on track.
So, yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, I believe that having somebody in the car early on is important. I think, I personally have gotten to the point where I can stand on the side of the track and I can watch your car, and 99% of the time I can say, oh, you release the brake pedal too quickly there, or I can tell you don't have your eyes up high enough. And it's just because, for me, right, I spend hundreds of days every single year staring at cars going around the track. So I get that. But I think the most important thing, or one of the important things that you mentioned there, was having a mentor. And, I think a lot of people end up going and getting into the sport, and whether it's autocrossing or HPDE or something like that. And, they're almost, I don't know if it's the ego that they're afraid to ask for help, or it's the, ooh, geez, I'm just a little nervous and kind of maybe shying away from asking for help. But, there are so many people in this sport who are just dying to help other people that don't be afraid to put your hand up and say, hey, can you explain this? Would you go into a track walk or a course walk with me? I see that you're really, really quick. Can I pick your brain about something? And most people in this sport will help you. Yes, there are some that are going, no, I'm not going to share what I've learned. But most people are willing to share. And I guess I'd also flip that around and go in, if you have been in the sport for a while, give back, be a mentor to people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that applies to everybody, no matter, what level you're at right now in DE or racing or whatever. I still have some of our instructors at PDS, I ask them to get in the car with me because I develop bad habits just like anybody else. And I miss things, and I'm like, why are you, a half a second a lap faster than I am? Well, let's go out on the track and let's see what you're doing. Well, here's your problem.
You mean you haven't perfected it yet? You haven't absolutely nailed it, and you've got nothing else to learn? Huh.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think a lot of people, when they've been out there and they've been involved in this long enough, I think they understand, the techniques, and they understand the theory. They understand the, vehicle dynamics and everything else. But then, putting it into practice and breaking through bad habits or breaking through mental blocks, not entering a turn fast enough. You don't want to go too fast. But at the same time, I mean, I've been guilty of slacking off going into a turn and really being overcautious and not pushing the car as hard as I could have.
Yeah.
So and then there's always the consistency issue too. Consistency is huge, but that just comes with time.
So I'd love your perspective on this. Because I've had a conversation about this topic recently a lot, we've got self-driving cars coming in. We've got all this technology from stability control and traction control and, automatic braking, all these things that are coming along. I mean, where's our sport going to be in 5 years or 10 years? Are we even going to be in the business anymore? Or is it still going to be around, do you think, or what?
I hope so. I just don't think you can get that same seat of the pants feel from a self-driving car. There's a lot of debate going on, about that and electric cars and everything else. And I think electric cars actually, presents a really neat challenge in racing to have series, and they do for, electric cars. They have Formula E. But at the same time, things like self-driving cars, I think that, maybe there's some sort of a spectator market there, but I think you're always going to have guys and girls that want to get behind the wheel of a car and pilot it at breakneck speeds around a racetrack for that sensation and that feeling and that adrenaline rush that you get. I just don't ever see that part of it going away. The technology, fortunately, as cars have gotten faster, the safety technology has, kind of kept pace. So while you can now jump in a car, I mean, my first car was a 71 Javelin with 330 horsepower. And back then, and this was in 1981, I think, and back then that was a boatload of horsepower. That was back in the emission wars. You just couldn't get horsepower out of a car back then unless you did a lot of work to it. But now you can run out and buy a Mustang with 400 horsepower under the hood and take it to the track. But unlike that old Javelin, it has anti-lock brakes and stability control. It has all the nannies on it that are going to keep you out of trouble or for the most part, keep you out of trouble as long as you have them turned on. So I think those are great. From an instructional standpoint, they can be utilized in a competition environment. But I still know a lot of people who want all that stuff off the car when they race. They just love that feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I guess I believe that our sport is not going to go away for a long, long time. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I think it's going to be around for a long time. And I think that much like when the automobile replaced the horse, the sport of horseback riding and equestrian jumping and horse racing and all those things, they actually grew. So, maybe our sport's actually going to get bigger. It's going to grow even more, but it's just going to be, there's going to be a bigger separation between what we do when we're driving to and from work every day and what we do when we go to the track.
Very true. I can't imagine not having my hands on the wheel of a car anytime. But, I think that racers are great innovators. And you can go back and see a long history of that.
Yeah.
for better and for worse.
Yeah.
We won't get into the discussion. But, racers really are great innovators. And I think that no matter what happens in terms of technology and regulation and everything else, I think there's still going to be, people who want to go head to head out there on a racetrack.
Yeah.
So it'll always be around. And I think it could help it grow. What I hope doesn't happen is we get so lazy on the civilian commercial day-to-day commuting side that cars just become an afterthought, and the passion for getting out there and actually driving a car starts to get weaned out of our culture. Because the U.S. has had a huge car culture ever since the invention of the automobile.
Yeah, and I guess, if people listening to this if they could do one thing is keep spreading your passion, keep talking about it, because, I think that's one of the concerns that a lot of people in our sport have is that, we're not attracting enough of the young people into the sport because they just don't have that passion. Well, maybe it's because we haven't shared that passion with them enough. So, do that, talk about it, encourage them, bring them to the track, show them what it's like. Let's do that. So right now, Joey, if somebody was they're going to go to the track this coming weekend, they're going to go and do a track day event, what advice would you give to them?
First and foremost, remember that you're there to have fun. Don't be too hard on yourself because it's your first time. Realize and understand that you're there to learn, and you're there to have fun. And as long as you start from that standpoint, if you start on that foot, I think everything else will happen the way that it should happen, the way that it needs to happen, because you'll be more open-minded, you'll be more relaxed. Just don't get in a hurry, just enjoy it.
Yeah. It's funny, the sport is all about going fast, and yet we have to slow down to do that.
Right.
Take our time to go fast, be patient, and yet in a sport that's all about being impatient. So we could carry on this conversation for another couple of hours, and, for sure I'll have you back on the show again. And what I'd actually like to do, Joey, is sometimes when I'm at a WRL race with you is let's go and talk to a few different people that are competing. That would be really fun to go and talk to people at the track and just share their thoughts when they're at the track, because people talk differently when they're at the track. It's maybe they're not quite so relaxed and patient.
That's a fact. Yeah, myself included sometimes.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
There's so many. At one of our events, there are so many people from so many different backgrounds in motorsports that that would be a very interesting day if we could just walk up and down pit road and talk to different individuals who have a background in they started out in motorcycle racing, or they started out in budget racing, or they started the SCCA, and then we have the guys who are or have raced pro. And that's a different perspective. You've seen it from a whole different angle. So that'd be a great time. I think I would probably learn things.
Yeah. So thanks for being on the show today and sharing your passion with us and everything. But what's new, or how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to contact you or learn more about what you're doing with WRL and Momentum?
Okay. First stop would be the World Racing League website, which is www.racewrl.com. Okay. And from there, you can spread out anywhere you want to go. There's a link to the HPDE site, which is idrivemomentum.com. So they're two separate websites, but there's a link over there. There's a link to our forum. There's a link to the rules and technical documents and helpful information, all of our sponsors and what they offer for our racers. All that's there. There's a slideshow so you can get a feel for what our events look like and what kind of cars are there. That's great information. If you want to email me, you can get me at jtodd, JTODD, at racewrl.com. And then you can always call us. We're still old-fashioned that way. It's a toll-free number, 844-RACE-WRL.
I like the Race WRL thing. And I'll put all of those links into the show notes so people can find that as well. So, yeah. So thanks, Joey, for being on the show today, and keep having fun.
Well, thanks for having me.
Here we go again with a quick speed secret. A short reminder that I hope will stick in your mind and be useful the next time you're on track. Here's today's tip. Maintaining focus is not as important as how quickly you're able to regain it. When I ask drivers what part of the mental game they struggle with the most common response is maintaining focus. But here's the thing. My experience tells me that even the best drivers lose their focus, as much as you or I do. The difference is they regain it quicker. They have a mental trigger, a phrase, word, or action that they use to trigger focus, and they practice using it so much that in a fraction of a second after losing focus, they regain it. When you stop worrying about losing focus and just practice regaining it, I'm sure you'll feel better about your focus when driving. If you'd like more tips, advice, and resources, check out my website at speedsecrets.com. And if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe to the Speed Secrets podcast. And even better, leave a review on iTunes. I'd really appreciate that. Also, please share with your friends. Thanks. Hey, keep learning and having fun.